Keith White, the founder of Playbook for Life. Coach, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing just fine. Coach, we want to start off by just going back in your early years of playing basketball yourself and talk about, how you got into just playing basketball and what made you stick with it over the years.
Well, back when I started playing, I grew up in eastern North Carolina, in rural eastern North Carolina, in a farming community on a farm in a small town. And we didn't have rec teams, so only basketball we played was out in the yard with my older brother and neighborhood kids that would come down, and we'd play, we played, and we played. And then once I got in high school, I started playing and just loved the game because it's just like most sports. Basketball just mirrors life, things in life, and I just loved it and kept playing. Of course, I was a lot thinner then when I played, but and I did very well in high school and ended up going to college and playing. Had a great time in college, but my love for the game even got greater. And so when I finished college, I went to work for the YMCA for a number of years, which what brought me to Charlotte. And running leagues and developing in basketball was always a big part of what I did, because I think it gives kids an opportunity to participate, play in a sport, just like all sports do. And like I said, it just mirrors life, and it helps them cope with things because everything doesn't always go the way they expect them to. And you learn the good and the bad. You learn how to win, you learn how to lose, you learn how to be a good loser, all those things. So that was my love for the game continued to grow. And then in 1989, I was called into the ministry. Went on staff at Hickory Grove Baptist Church, where I ran all the sports ministry, basketball, soccer, baseball, all the different sports. And was there about 10 years. And but God called me to leave there and start Playbook for Life ministry, which is basically to share Christ through sports. And basketball is a big part of that. And while I was at Hickory Grove, I was involved in starting this basketball league with 3 other churches. We had, I think, 20 teams. Didn't even have any girls' teams at that time, just boys. And then when I left, I continued to work with the churches, and it continued to grow. And now, last year, we had about 230 teams, about 28 churches, I think, involved. And all different from age 6 up through 18, both boys and girls in every division. So it's a great opportunity and for the kids to continue to play a sport like basketball that, again, they get to experience that opportunity to play that basketball. And it's a very diverse league. It's not just a Baptist league or Presbyterian league, it's a lot of different denominations from all over Charlotte. So it's not just a community, not just a neighborhood league, and probably the key thing about the league is the diversity. Kids should get a chance, need to have an opportunity to participate against other churches, against other communities, against other cultures, whatever. So the diversity helps them learn to get along with everybody. And so that's the goal of the league. The main goal, obviously, is to share Christ, but to give our kids an opportunity to continue to experience that sport, and they can grow in it.
Well, Coach, one of the things that I want to touch on a little bit further, and that is you see church leagues all across the United States, all across the world for basketball. Mm-hmm. But I think it is a huge accomplishment to have, you said 230 teams in your league. How do you think you've managed to grow and sustain that kind of volume of basketball and participation in you guys' league?
Well, I think honestly, and it's not me. I think first and foremost, our goals are the same, and we know that God is in it, and that's always going to be the case. That's the first and most foremost thing that we have in the league. But I think the fact that the teams, the churches, see the impact of being able to play across town, across in different communities. Sometimes it's an inconvenience to travel on a Saturday, even though on a Saturday we play all of our games generally on Saturdays, and we use about 18 to 20 gyms, mostly all church gyms throughout Charlotte. And so it gives churches a chance to go, our kids a chance to go and participate and play in a different setting than maybe they're used to. And honestly, the work that our coordinators, our church coordinators, our coaches, our leaders in the different churches, from the scorekeepers to the clock keepers, the coaches, the gym site coordinators, they do such a great job. It's not a perfect league. Sometimes we have our issues as far as somebody gets a little intense. We may have a parent or a coach that gets a little intense. To me, that's a ministry opportunity. And that's what I tell our coaches and our coordinators. None of us are perfect. So when someone gets upset about losing a game or a kid gets upset, that's the perfect opportunity to minister to them and say, hey, this is what we're about. We understand that. And I think that's what's made our league great. Not that we run perfect all the time, but we continue to strive to get better and to deal with anything that comes our way.
A part of within the playing that you have, I understand that you have all different types of kids at different skill sets and different levels. Talk to me about how you level the playing field throughout your season, because we think that's kind of unique in how you do that to keep it competitive and not some of the other way other programs do it, where you see a lot of these blowouts and different things like that, to where kids become less involved or less concerned with participation.
That's a great question, and I think now we'll have some blowouts from time to time. There's no way around when you have that many teams. It's very difficult to keep that from happening. But what we do some unique things. We started about 7 or 8 years ago when I do we start the first Saturday in December always in our league. And we'll play 3 Saturdays in December, and then we take a couple of weeks off, and then we come back in January and February and finish up the regular season and the tournament. So what we do is I do the schedule for December for those 3 Saturdays. So most teams always play at least 2 of those 3 Saturdays. And then we ask the churches to kind of give us a rating of what they think, if their team is experienced or not experienced. So then I pair them up. When we do the schedule, we pair them up as best that we know how, which is not an exact science, but we pair them up so that we eliminate as much as we can the blowouts. Then we take those December results. I take those December results, put them with the churches when they sent in what the teams were experienced or not experienced, how experienced they were, and we put all that together, and we again kind of reshuffle the teams based on the results in December. So the January and February games now are put so the teams that maybe are a little weaker, they're going to play teams of the same caliber. The main goal is to separate the very experienced teams with the teams that maybe are very weak or less experienced, so they don't play each other during the regular season. And then they finish up the season, and then when tournament time rolls, we comes around, we actually flight the tournament for each division. So each division, for instance, we have a high school, let's say in our high school boys division, we may have 30 teams. So we'll take 6 or 8 teams that have the best record and we put them in the first flight. And then we go right down the line. So the teams in the last flight they either didn't win a game or maybe won one game. And so they play their own little tournament, single elimination, against other teams with basically the same record. And what we do is we have a champion and a runner-up in each flight. And the championship trophy that the team gets for winning doesn't say first flight, fifth flight, third flight, whatever. It just says flight champion, flight runner-up. Because we want the kids they're playing their own tournament. And the amazing thing that happens is we have teams that didn't win a game all year and win their flight, win the championship. You would have thought they had won the NBA or the college championship. They're so excited. But even if they don't win, the whole idea is that even if they don't win, even if they lose the first game of the tournament, the chances are, and again, it's not an exact science, but the chances are the games are going to be more competitive and they're going to have more fun and they're going to remember, we did okay. We improved. We got better because we were getting beat all year, but in the tournament, we only got beat by 2 or 4. So, or we won our championship, or we got the runner-up. So that's how we do that.
I think that's a very unique and a very great concept for kids to keep them engaged during league play. Another thing I wanted to talk about, you mentioned a little bit earlier, your team. I know that with this, you have some help around. And I know one of those people that's kind of influential in your program, your daughter. And she actually played in the WNBA for a spell, if I'm correct.
She actually signed with the Utah Stars. She played in college and played overseas in Germany. And she had a short stint with the Utah Stars. But she now is here. She's got 3 kids, 3 of my grandkids. And she's an assistant AD at Hickory Grove Christian School. Her husband is the athletic director. And they both help in the ministry when I do camps in the summer for churches, and she is she basically directs my camps and does a great job running the camps, and the kids have a great time. And again, even in the camps, our goal is for the kids to enjoy basketball. But it's important also, I think you can enjoy it and still get the fundamental of the game. Because the better you learn to play, the more fun it is.
All right. We get that ministry is definitely a primary goal with Playbook for Life. But let's talk about also some of the other outreach you do in terms of, I know you guys go abroad some. I know you have the Frog Center. Talk about that for us a little bit and enlighten us on how that all works with Playbook.
Okay, thanks for asking about that. I've been blessed to be able to travel overseas a good bit. One of the biggest places, or the furthest place I go probably, is South Africa. I go down to right outside of Cape Town in Mitchell's Plain, which is a very impoverished area outside of Cape Town, and I go down to basketball camps, play with the kids. We do not only basketball, but other sports also with some of the schools. But back in 2002, we finished a community center called the Frog Center. We take some guys in construction and other people that go, and they work right along beside the people there in Mitchell's Plain. And it took about 2 years, really, 1.5 to 2 years to get the Frog Center completed. And honestly, they did most of the work between our trips. But we finished it in 2002, and it has a gym, computer lab, dressing rooms, classrooms, a kitchen, and it's now become the center for community activities and in that community in Mitchell's Plain. And it has been a real blessing. It was built with no money, and when it was finished, there was no money owed. It was debt-free. We didn't build it, God built it. But we had to be the ones that show up and do our part. And that's what we tried to do, and God has blessed that. And I've gotten to do basketball camps for a church in England, Haiti, Dominican Republic. So I've got to travel a bit, enjoyed it. South Africa is obviously the most. I've been over there about 18 times. Getting ready to go back in May the 3rd, we go back, taking about 15 people. And we'll go back, and they're actually adding some classrooms on the back of the Frog Center for a daycare center that they already have, but they've there's a home-based health ministry operating now out of the Frog Center of ladies that go out into the community and do health checkups and blood pressure and medicine checks and all that with the people in the community, because most of them can't afford to go to the hospital or go to a doctor. And a lot of people come to the Frog Center to get their checkups. Well, when you have a daycare center in the Frog Center, it makes it a little tough. You're doing tests, you're doing blood tests. So they're building these classrooms out behind the Frog Center to kind of use, they call it a creche, which is a daycare center, to move the daycare center creche outside in those rooms. It will be connected to the Frog Center, but that way it frees up the classrooms in the Frog Center to use as testing rooms, and so that's a big thing, and it's been a real blessing to see that grow and transition into what the community needs are.
Well, Coach, we're going to back up for just a second. Something that I wanted to discuss a little bit earlier and left out, and I think it's very cool that you do this. There is a lack of coaching in church ball, rec ball, basketball, period, across the nation here in America. And I know that you have created some tools that help parents who volunteer or anybody who volunteers in you guys' program. And I think that's really cool that you do that, because it helps give a better experience to your kids when they play, and also to have a more organized type of basketball instead of just more of a pickup style of play. Mm-hmm. Talk about that, those tips and what you do to help your coaches out along the way.
Thanks. One thing I noticed through running basketball leagues, church leagues, and same with recreation leagues, even if it's not a church league, but in our church league, most of your coaches obviously are parents. Some of them a lot of them have more experience than others, but a lot of times it's a parent who just wants to give their time, but they've never coached before and they don't know how to run a practice. And sometimes people say, well, it's just a church league, but it makes a difference, because number one is most teams only have a small window of practice time a week, an hour, hour and a half, most of the time. So you don't want to waste that. And I think kids learning the game the right way and learning the fundamentals, again, like I said before, they enjoy it a lot more. But the better they get at anything, the more enjoyable it is. So it was important for me to come up with some type of program training method to help coaches, help people just become better coaches. So what I developed really a couple of summers ago, we have 90 drills and skills that are on pocket cards available. And what the coach can do is they can look at a drill and say, oh, that's how I do that drill. And it has coaching tips on it. It's got a little diagram. And then it has practice plans. Because one of the things that I think I've seen happen over the years with my coaches when I was at Hickory Grove and coaches I've seen in the league, what happens is they've never coached before. So they say, here, whoever is getting them to coach says, here's a couple of basketballs, here's your 10 kids or 8 kids, however many you have on your team, start practice. And they get out and they go, okay, let's all shoot layups. Let's shoot foul shots. And there's no real plan. Well, when you have plan, if you have an hour of practice, you may waste 20 minutes of it. So the idea is to help them work their way through a practice, and the practice plans are broken down by the minute. So 3 minutes warm up, 5 minutes this, and all the way through for the whole hour. Now, one important component, and this gives them, the coaches, because knowledge is power. You know, when somebody knows something, they feel better. Kids feel better if their coach at least acts like they know what they're doing when they want to run a drill or something, and they move from one to another and they don't waste time. So the pocket cards gives them that kind of knowledge that they may not normally have. Now, there are coaches that have coached for years and have their own, and that's great. These aren't necessarily new. These are things that I did when I was in college and high school and other people, and there are no real new drills out there. You know, they're all old. But this is just putting them on paper so they can see. And another component is, for us in our league, is devotions, because I think the spiritual, to have that devotion, to be able to sit down with kids during a practice and share a devotion with them is paramount. It's a part of the practice, should be part of the practice, just like shooting layups, foul shots, offense, defense, whatever it may be. So I've got the practice plans. We have like practice plans for every age, all the way up through high school. And then we have 16 devotions. They're on paper. They're 3 to 5 minute devotions. And on my practice plans, I have a devotion time. Usually I like to do it, and I tell coaches, do it in the middle of practice. The kids probably need a break. So I tell them, stop practice halfway through, sit them down in a corner somewhere, and have a devotion with them, talk to them. That does two things. One is, some people like doing them at the beginning. Most people like doing them at the end. The problem with doing them at the end, parents are usually there at the door waiting for their kids because it's dinner time, or they need to get them ready for school the next day, get in bed, whatever. So they're in a rush. So you do it in the middle of practice, so you got them captive. If you do it early, sometimes kids aren't there. So that's the reason we do the devotion in the middle. So all that is tied in together, and then it has some resources that I think coaches need, like game management, when and how to talk to a referee, when to ask a question at the scores table, do's and don'ts of coaching, just simple things that kind of help them traverse through a season, because it just helps them have the knowledge to run a practice. And so that's what that's designed to do. And we're excited. Our coaches in our league used them last year, and we're excited to keep them using it and to market it to other organizations.
That's great, Coach. That's great. You are a basketball guy.
That's true.
And we know that basketball has been a huge part of your life from early years all the way to now. So I got to ask this question. Who is your favorite player today in the NBA or wherever?
My favorite player, oh my, that's a good question. My favorite player ever that played in college and professional was David Thompson. That's just, I'm a David Thompson guy.
Tell us why.
Well, I just think, he's a guy that that he's not a towering person, but he had this ability, and he has taken, he took basketball and was able to, just like a lot of people, but not only just a basketball, but he was not, just like none of us are a perfect person, but he has taken his experiences, some mostly good, some not so good, and now he uses that to reach kids in the communities and to help kids navigate through life. And actually, a number of years ago, coached his daughter in AAU basketball. Great girl and phenomenal track athlete. But great, just a great family, and just he's a great guy. But there's a lot of great players in the NBA today. Obviously, you got your Steph Currys and those guys. I like LeBron. I think he's a phenomenal player, one in a lifetime type player. And I think sometimes he may get a little bad rap because he is so good and so physical. But the one thing about LeBron is you never hear negative stuff. He's a community guy. He does stuff. Now, again, I'm sure he's not perfect, just like none of them are. But he tries to use his basketball experiences to help other people. And that's where I lean to when I start looking up the players.
That's great, Coach. That's great. So let's talk about what's next for Playbook. Where do you see improvement? What do you feel like would be a benefit to helping your program overall?
Well, I think, and we talk about this when we have our committee meeting, because we have a group of churches that are together. Like I said, those guys, Mike Henley, who does a lot of work and is invaluable to the program as far as the basketball ministry, does a lot of work and helps me with all the Saturday games. But it's so important when you have as many teams as we have. We always want to improve our communication. Because you're always going to have things that come up. A gym, remember we use church gyms. So from time to time, a church will come up and say, we have this function at our gym that we didn't know about. It doesn't happen very often, but our gym is not going to be able to be used on this particular day. Now, they generally tell me that when I do the schedule, so 98% of the time, 99% of the time, I know that the gym is not available on that day before I even do the schedule, so I don't schedule. But every now and then things happen, or the weather affects us. Somebody's lights power goes out, or the gym gets wet from a rain, they have a leak, and whatever it may be. We need to be able to communicate to our teams and our coaches so that we don't have teams show up and thinking they've got a game, because that's very frustrating. We put in a rule a few years ago in our league that we actually can start a game with 4 players. It's a church league. We want them to play. So the referees do a great job. David Payne has been coordinating the referees as long as I've been doing the league, and he sends us. I do the schedule, send him the schedule, and he sends referees. And then I use another gentleman I know, Eck Little, that refs. He does the little guys, the 6-year-olds and 7, 8-year-olds, and does a fantastic job. His guys, but the referees will, if a team shows up, say they only have 3, then the other team either will give them let them use, they scrimmage. It's maybe not an official game if they only got 3 or less. But the important thing is they're getting to play. Most teams have grandparents, parents, people coming. Sometimes people come from out of town. They want to see their kids play or their grandkids play or whoever. It's frustrating. So we want to be able to communicate. Having that communication piece is so important. So we strive very hard and continue to strive to really improve that. We're not out to increase numbers. We're glad to. We want the opportunity from as many churches to participate as can participate, because we want them to have the opportunity to reach their community for Christ, because that's where they're going to be fed, at their church, in their community. So that's the big piece, is to give kids an opportunity to play, give churches an opportunity to reach their community through the sport of basketball.
All right, Coach. Thanks again for coming out and taking time with us today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.